Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about people's new home turning out way wrong. Get comfortable, turn the lights down, because these stories stay with you long after the video ends. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. I'd just moved from Oregon to a small town in Tennessee called Brandon. It's about an hour from Knoxville, tucked between patches of woods and open fields that all start to blur together after a while. The house I found was dirt cheap, which should have tipped me off. 1 story, 3 bedrooms, plus a basement I wasn't really planning to touch. It sat on a thin road with no shoulder, just a gravel strip leading to the driveway and woods wrapping around the back like a curtain. It had that look like someone had cared for it once a long time ago, then gave up halfway through a renovation. Paint was flaking off the siding in spots, the front step creaked like an old knee, and the mailbox leaned like it wanted out. But it was private, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. I signed a lease before I even saw the basement. The first couple nights were uneventful. I spent most of the time unpacking the basics and pretending to organize. But really, I was just trying to feel normal. Everything was quiet, and I mean quiet. No traffic, no neighbors yelling through walls, no city sounds bouncing off concrete. It was the kind of silence that makes you notice your own breathing. On the second night, I tried to shut the hallway bathroom door, and it bounced back at me. Not hard, just like something was in the way. But when I looked behind it, there was nothing there. I figured maybe the door frame was crooked or the latch was off. The next day, I grabbed a screwdriver and messed with the hinges for a bit. Didn't fix much. The door still resisted closing all the way, and now and then I'd hear a soft thump like a knock, but not quite in the hall, and I'd find the door slightly ajar again. Old house, I told myself. Old houses groan, shift, creak. It's just wood expanding or something. I left it alone. A few days in, I got back from a grocery run and found one of the kitchen chairs sitting halfway down the hallway. Just one chair, not tipped over, not broken, just placed there, like someone had started to bring it somewhere, then forgot or changed their mind. I froze for a second. I hadn't moved any of the chairs since I got there. I hadn't even eaten at the table yet. I'd been living off sandwiches and coffee and whatever I could make in one pan. I stood there holding a bag of eggs and fruit, just staring at it. It felt weird, off. Like walking into a room and realizing something's missing but not knowing what. I picked the chair up and returned it to the table without thinking much more about it, but that was when I started locking the doors. All of them, even if I was just taking a shower or reading on the couch. I couldn't explain why. It just felt necessary. That weekend, around midnight, I was half asleep watching something on TV when I heard what sounded like light footsteps on the back porch. Not heavy, more like the sound of bare feet brushing against old wood. Too soft to be boots. Too irregular to be an animal, I thought. I muted the TV, held my breath for a second, and then grabbed my flashlight from the counter. The porch was empty, nothing there. But the screen door was moving, just gently, like someone had let go of it a few seconds before I looked. I hadn't touched that door since moving in. It hadn't been windy. The air was still thick with summer humidity. I opened the main door and stepped outside, shining the light across the yard and into the trees. Just brush and branches and shadows. No movement, no sounds except for one cicada chirping off somewhere too far to matter. I told myself maybe a raccoon had bumped the door, or a squirrel. Something harmless. But I deadbolted it tight and jammed a chair under the handle anyway. That night, I left the hallway light on and sat in bed for a long time before sleep caught up. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the kitchen faucet turning on. Just a quick burst like someone had flipped the handle up and let it run for 1 second before turning it off. I didn't move. From my bed, I could see the edge of the hallway through the open door. I stared at that empty patch of light for what felt like 10 minutes, listening. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I got up, slowly, switched on the bedroom light first, then the hallway, then the kitchen. The faucet was off, no drips, nothing out of place. Every door was still locked. Windows too. I checked them twice. It didn't make sense, but there was nothing I could point to, nothing I could prove. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? That the plumbing was acting suspicious? The next day, I wandered into town and camped out at this little coffee shop for most of the evening. I sat in the corner with a mug I didn't refill, scrolling my phone, pretending to read. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Articles about how to tell if your house hates you. Nothing online really helped. Everything sounded exaggerated or fake, and what I was dealing with didn't feel like that. It felt specific, personal, like whatever was happening had only just started to notice me. That night, I left the kitchen light on. Small comfort, but it helped. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up sweating through the sheets. The room felt off. Still, but not calm. Then I realized my bedroom door was closed. I never closed it. I sat up, waited, watched, and then I heard it. The knob turned. Just a little. A soft click, like someone was gently trying it, maybe expecting it to be locked. I couldn't breathe. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. After about 30 seconds, I got up. I wasn't brave about it. My legs felt like noodles, and my hands were shaking. But I opened the door fast anyway, like I could surprise whatever was out there. Hallway was empty. Kitchen was dark. The light I'd left on? Off. That's when I said it. I need to get out of here. Just those words. Quiet. Flat. Flat. Like admitting something I already knew. I packed the essentials into a duffel bag the next morning. Just clothes, wallet, charger, toothbrush. Didn't take anything extra. I drove into Knoxville and checked into a budget motel. I emailed the landlord and said I wouldn't be finishing out the lease. No explanation. Just paid through the month and let it go. I was 22 when I signed the lease on a small house just outside of Marion. I moved in on a Saturday. My friend Jalen helped me haul everything over in his truck, mostly just a futon, a couple milk crates full of clothes, and an old dresser I got off Facebook Marketplace. The house had 2 bedrooms, pale green siding that looked like it hadn't been painted since before I was born, and a front porch that leaned forward like it was slowly sinking into the dirt road. My shifts were mostly evenings, so I got used to coming home around midnight. The town practically rolled itself up after 9. No traffic, no porch lights, no noise. Just me, my tired brain, and whatever leftovers I had in the fridge. The first one was small. I came home one night and the hall closet light was on. It's one of those little pull-string bulbs, something you'd have to physically turn on. I hadn't even opened that door since I moved in. I turned it off, didn't think much of it. A couple days later, the same thing. Then I noticed the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept random stuff like takeout menus and batteries, would be open an inch or two when I came home. Not every night, just sometimes. One morning, I found my toothbrush lying across the edge of the sink, damp like it had just been used. I live alone. No one else has a key. I chalked it up to stress or just being scatterbrained. The night shift does weird things to your memory. You find yourself putting cereal in the fridge and the milk in the pantry without realizing it, but still, that feeling crept in, like something was just a little off. Then came Sunday. I had the whole day off and decided to deep clean the bathroom. Just one of those spur-of-the-moment things. I was scrubbing under the sink, trying to get rid of this weird, musty smell that wouldn't go away, when I noticed something carved into the inside of the vanity door. At first, I thought it was just a crack in the wood, but when I looked closer, I saw small, deliberate scratches, like someone had used a nail or a house key. It said, "Don't sleep in the back room." Not bold or dramatic. Just there. Quiet and scratched in like a note meant only for me. That stopped me cold. I had been sleeping in the back bedroom since day one. It was cooler than the front one, and the windows didn't rattle as much. I just stared at that message for a while. Then I closed the cabinet, walked down the hall, and moved my stuff into the other room. No hesitation. The front room wasn't great. It got too hot in the afternoon, and it smelled a little like dust and old fabric no matter how much I cleaned. But I didn't care. I didn't tell anyone about what I found. I didn't want to explain something I barely understood myself. 3 days later, I got home from work just after midnight, same as always. I walked into the front bedroom and stopped. My bed, now in the new room, was completely stripped. Every pillow, blanket, and sheet gone. Not crumpled or thrown off. Just missing. I searched everywhere. Laundry hamper, under the bed, inside the closet, even the old room, nothing. Just a mattress sitting there bare like it had never been made. That night, I curled up on the couch with a hoodie and a throw blanket I found in the trunk of my car. After that, things spiraled. One night, I came home and the bathroom faucet was running. Full blast, water everywhere. I hadn't used it that morning. My boots, which I always lined up neatly by the door, were turned backwards. Another time, while I was eating dinner, the fridge door creaked open behind me. I just sat there, frozen, watching it slowly swing out like someone was expecting me to get up and close it. Then came the photo. We had a storm one night, one of those sudden, heavy southern storms that knocks out power for an hour or two. I went to check the breaker panel in the hallway closet. While I was poking around in there with my phone flashlight, I noticed something stuck behind the metal panel cover. I pulled it out. It was a Polaroid. Faded, slightly warped from moisture, but the image was clear enough. It was a picture of the back bedroom, my old one. The bed was stripped bare. The walls were stained, like something had soaked through the plaster. And in the corner sat a girl, maybe 16 or 17, curled up, her face hidden behind her hands. You couldn't see her expression. Just the way her shoulders were hunched like she'd been crying for hours. Someone had written on the white border of the photo, "This is where she stayed." I sat down right there on the hallway floor and stared at that photo for what felt like forever. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the couch with every light on in the house. I even turned on the TV for background noise, just to make the silence feel less sharp. At some point around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy ones. Not the creaking of a house settling. Not the scurrying of something in the walls. These were measured steps. They started by the bedrooms, moved past the couch where I was curled up, and stopped near the kitchen. That was it. No door opened. No sound after. The next morning, I found every kitchen cabinet open. Every drawer pulled out. All of my silverware was scattered across the floor in a messy, deliberate pile. Like someone had emptied the drawers while looking for something or trying to send a message. I finally broke down and called Everett, a guy from work. We weren't exactly close, but I remembered he mentioned once that he grew up in Marion. I told him I needed to ask him something about the house. He came by that afternoon, clearly a little uncomfortable just being there. He didn't even sit down, just walked around quietly looking at the rooms. Then he turned to me and asked, "You ever hear about what happened here?" I shook my head. He nodded, like he'd expected that. There was a girl, about your age, rented this place a few years back, worked night shifts at the CVS off Eastview. One day she just stopped showing up. Nobody heard from her. After a few days, someone came to check. House was locked. No sign of struggle. She was just gone. I asked him what they found. He hesitated, then said, "There was a stain in the back bedroom, like old blood, but no body, no evidence. Nothing was missing. It went cold. Her name was Leela." I showed him the Polaroid and asked, "Is this her?" He looked at it for a long time, long enough that I almost regretted showing him. Then he just gave one slow nod. I didn't go back to the house after that. I packed a duffel, left the key in the mailbox, and texted the landlord to let him know I was gone. I was 28 when we bought the place in northern Georgia. The realtor, a woman named Myra, told us an older couple had lived there for ages. The husband died a few years ago, and the wife had gone to live with her daughter in South Carolina. We closed in early April and moved in a week later. It was raining that day, and our mattress got soaked carrying it in. We had to sleep on the couch for the first 2 nights. It was cramped, and the couch smelled faintly of the previous owner's old cologne, like stale cedar and aftershave. The kind of scent that lingers in furniture long after someone's gone. My partner's job was in Dalton, about an hour out. They left early, came home late. I worked from home, freelance editing mostly. Articles, educational material, that kind of thing. Quiet work. The days were peaceful at first. I'd open the windows, let the breeze in, try to ignore the never-ending to-do list the house came with. We had peeling wallpaper in the hallway, water stains in the ceiling above the guest bathroom, and one room that still smelled like cigarettes no matter how long we aired it out. That first week was just unpacking, figuring out where the sun hit in the mornings, which outlets actually worked, which drawers stuck. The usual. I wasn't looking for anything strange. I didn't even notice the crawl space door until the third or fourth day. It was a low, square hatch in the hallway near the laundry closet. I assumed it led under the house. No stairs, just a drop-down panel with a metal latch and a wooden handle. It wasn't until I passed it one afternoon and noticed it was slightly open, maybe 2 inches, that I even thought about it. I shut it without much thought, but the next time I walked by, it was open again. A little wider this time. I figured I hadn't latched it right. Old house. Hinges shift. Floors bow. I closed it again, this time pushing hard until I heard the click. Later that evening, it was open again. I found a rubber doorstop in one of our moving boxes the next morning and jammed it in front of the panel. Left it there while I ran to the store. I came back with groceries and found the hatch wide open again, and the wedge sitting several feet away across the hallway, like someone had kicked it aside. Nothing else was touched. The doors were still locked, the windows shut. I even checked the Ring camera we just installed by the front door. Nothing. Just squirrels. I didn't say anything to my partner that night. I couldn't think of a way to explain it that didn't sound ridiculous. Hey, I think the crawl space is rejecting my attempts to keep it closed. Wasn't exactly casual conversation. A few nights later, I was working in the back room around 9. We'd set up my desk by the window so I could look out over the yard. It was dark by then, quiet. I was copy editing something dry, an educational packet about soil erosion, I think, and I heard a noise above me. That wouldn't be unusual in most houses, but we didn't have an upstairs. At first, it sounded like creaking, maybe wood expanding, or pipe shifting. But then it got more rhythmic, heel to toe, slow and steady. Not heavy stomps, not random pops, just deliberate movement. As if someone was walking directly over my head, taking their time. I didn't move at first, just sat there, blinking at the ceiling. After a minute or so, I stood up and walked the length of the house, barefoot, not making a sound. Every door was locked, every window shut. I told myself maybe the roof was settling, maybe an animal had gotten up there. A raccoon maybe, but it didn't sit right. The noise wasn't above the roof line, it was between floors. Except we didn't have more than one. 2 days later, I was organizing boxes in the laundry room, trying to sort out what we could toss. That's when I found the box. It was stuffed in the back of an upper cabinet, behind a crumpled tarp and a stack of paint cans. A cardboard box labeled in clean, careful handwriting, Xmas lights do not open. Naturally, I opened it. Inside were 6 cassette tapes wrapped in tissue, and a small spiral notebook with a red cover. The notebook was worn, but the writing inside was sharp and neat, each page numbered, starting with day 1. The handwriting looked like something from an old address book, tight, slanted, all caps. The tapes weren't labeled, just plain black plastic. I had an old player stored in a tub of cords and cables, dug it out and popped in the first tape. For the first 10 minutes, there was nothing, just faint ambient noise, creaks, maybe breathing, then a voice, low and dry. It's still down there, I think it waits until I sleep. That was it. The next tape had more gaps of silence, then it moved again. I didn't dream that. It was under the vent. And then, later, I don't think I can hold the door anymore. The voice never changed. Always the same steady whisper, like he was sitting close to the mic, watching something while he recorded. I listened to 3 of them. That was enough. That night, I left the box in the garage and didn't go near it again. The next morning, I passed the crawl space door again and finally looked closer at the frame. I hadn't noticed before, but something had been scratched into the wood just inside the panel. Deep grooves, not carved for show, just gouged in, quick and desperate. Stay above. I ran my fingers over it. It wasn't new. It was old and faded, rubbed down in some places like someone had run their hands over it 1,000 times. That night, my partner left for a work retreat. I stayed behind. We weren't fighting or anything. They just had to go, and I said I'd be fine. I turned on every light in the main rooms, double-locked the doors, set my laptop up on the couch with a comfort movie playing in the background. I was determined to make the place feel normal again. At 2:15 a.m., I got up for water, walked into the hallway. The crawl space hatch was standing wide open. No wedge, no warning, just open. I stood there staring at it. Then I heard it breathing, short and panicked, like someone was hiding but couldn't quite stay quiet. It was right below the floor. I backed away, slowly, didn't turn my back on it. I locked myself in the bedroom and sat against the door until sunrise. When I finally opened the door, the hatch was closed again. The wedge was back, but this time it was lying across the hall on the opposite wall, like someone had tossed it there just to make a point. I didn't touch it. My partner came home that night and found the box in the garage while looking for camping gear. They walked in holding it, asking if it was mine. I didn't even pretend. I told them everything. That night, we packed bags and drove to a motel in Jasper. We only went back once in daylight to get the rest of our stuff. We sold the house 2 months later. The house was just outside Greystone, a quiet little town in Tennessee. I signed the lease on a Wednesday and moved in that Saturday morning. By Monday night, I was already lying awake wondering if I'd made a mistake. The landlord had said it had been empty for about a year, which made sense, but the inside was surprisingly spotless. No musty smell. That first night, everything was fine. I remember heating up a frozen burrito, drinking a cold beer, and passing out early on the futon I dragged into the living room. The place didn't have a working ceiling fan, so I cracked the sliding glass door open a bit to let in some air. I woke up at around 4 in the morning, totally alert. I hadn't had a nightmare or anything. I just suddenly opened my eyes and had the strong sense that something had woken me. I lay there for a few seconds, then heard what sounded like footsteps outside, slow, deliberate crunching on gravel. I sat up, looked out the window beside the futon. Nothing. Just trees across the road and a thin stretch of pavement reflecting a bit of moonlight. I waited a few more seconds. No more sounds. I told myself it was probably a deer, or maybe some stray dog wandering around. I didn't want to start spiraling over weird noises before I'd even unpacked. By the third night, I had most of my stuff in, enough to start turning the back room into a makeshift home office. It wasn't a big room. It had just one small window that faced the side yard, and no heating or AC vent, which meant it got stuffy pretty fast. I unlocked the window, pushed it open maybe 4 inches. It took some pressure to get the thumb slide latch to disengage, one of those older metal ones that doesn't glide so much as fight back. I didn't think much of it, left it cracked and sat at the desk to work. It was sometime after 9:30 when I heard it. A soft, slow knock. Not like someone at the door. This was different. It sounded like something bumping into the siding, just a dull thud, then another, close together. Not frantic, just present. I froze, listened. Another few seconds went by, 2 more soft knocks, low to the ground. I got up, grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, and stepped outside through the side door by the kitchen. Nothing. The siding looked untouched. No scratches, no dented spots, no animals darting off into the bushes. The air was dead still. Even the trees weren't moving. I stood there longer than I probably needed to, just listening. The next morning, I went to shut that office window and noticed it was open wider than I'd left it. Not forced open, just slid up more. It was smooth, undamaged, like someone who knew how to work that particular kind of latch had come along and adjusted it. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember if I had maybe opened it more and forgot. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. I closed it, locked it again, pulled the blinds down and shut the door to that room. I didn't go back in for days. The thing about stuff like that is, when it happens, it doesn't feel dramatic. It's not a movie moment. It's subtle, annoying. You start questioning yourself. You tell yourself you're being paranoid, that maybe you were tired. Maybe you left it open wider than you meant to. You run all the maybes through your head like you're trying to solve a math problem and somehow reach zero. It doesn't work. A few days later, I was in the living room watching a movie. I had the lights off, sound low, legs tucked under a blanket. Out of nowhere, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Just 2 or 3. Light, but definitely movement. The kind of sound carpet makes when someone's shifting their weight mid-step. I muted the TV immediately. Silence. I waited. My pulse was going like I'd just sprinted a flight of stairs. Nothing else came. No more steps, no creaks. I stood up slowly and peeked around the corner. Hall was empty. After that, I started locking my bedroom door at night. It felt stupid at first. I lived alone. But it gave me just enough of a mental buffer to fall asleep without sitting bolt upright at every small sound. That held me over until one night, I woke up at around 2 a.m., just totally still. No sound, no bad dream, just that same strange awareness, like my body had noticed something before my mind did. The room was dark. The air felt heavier than it should have. I remember breathing slow and shallow, like making noise might invite something. I didn't hear anything at first. I just felt it, this shift in pressure, like something else was in the room. I finally grabbed my phone off the nightstand, turned on the light, and scanned the space. It was the same. Same corners, same furniture, same everything, except the doorknob. It was turned halfway down. It wasn't jiggling. It wasn't being pulled. It had just been turned and left there. I didn't move for probably 10 minutes. Just stared at that doorknob, holding my phone like a shield. Eventually, I got up, yanked it back upright, and shoved a chair under the handle. I didn't sleep at all after that. Next day, I started asking around. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted to know if anyone else had ever lived there and experienced weird things. I went to a gas station off Highway 19, where a lot of the town's locals grabbed coffee and sandwiches, chatted with the guy working behind the counter. I mentioned the address casually, like I was asking about a neighborhood, not the house itself. He gave me this look. Not concerned, not surprised, just tired. People don't stay there long, he said, like it was a fact, not a mystery. The woman behind me in line, who'd been fiddling with the lottery ticket, chimed in without even turning around. It's that Avera house, right? Folks don't like how it feels in there. I asked, what do you mean? She shrugged. Like you're not alone. That's all. The worst thing was, no one seemed shocked by what I was describing. Like I was just confirming something everyone had already quietly agreed on. A few days after that, I was boiling water in the kitchen late at night, just standing there zoning out, when I heard the front door creak open. I mean the exact sound, the hinges groaning, the thump as it hit the wall, like someone had come in, slow and confident. I dropped the spoon I was holding and ran to the front door. Still shut, still locked. Deadbolt still engaged. I didn't even check the rest of the house. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and slept in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat 2 towns over. The final thing that pushed me out happened the night I decided to pack the last of the office stuff. I hadn't been in there since the window incident. I was just grabbing a few things. Old notebooks, extra cables, stuff I hadn't used in weeks when I opened the bottom drawer of the desk and saw it. A small, lined sheet of paper, looked torn from a cheap notepad. The handwriting was blocky, a little uneven, but clear. It said, if you lock the door, they come in another way. That was it. No name, no date, no other markings. I dropped the paper back into the drawer like it burned. My throat was dry. I remember just staring at the window blinds, not even wanting to lift them. I left everything else behind. Grabbed my keys, locked the door behind me, and drove straight to a motel in Harbridge, 30 miles north. I left a voicemail for the landlord, told him I was forfeiting the deposit, told him I wasn't coming back. After the breakup in Winston, long, drawn out, and exhausting, I didn't have the energy to stay in a town full of reminders. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I didn't have to bump into anyone who knew me or knew what happened. At first, that stuff made me laugh a little. I told myself it gave the place character. I painted a couple of the walls, cleaned out the fireplace. Then, about 6 weeks after moving in, I came back from the grocery store and noticed the kitchen drawers were open. Just a few of them, barely cracked really, like someone had started going through them but stopped halfway. I stood there for a second, trying to retrace my steps. Had I opened them earlier? Maybe I'd left them that way while looking for something. I was tired, and it had been a long day, so I closed them and didn't think much of it. But after that, I started noticing other things. A spoon on the counter I didn't remember using. Not dirty, just there. My Bluetooth speaker, which always sat on the top shelf in the living room, randomly sitting on the floor one afternoon when I got home from a walk. A roll of paper towels that I swore was full the day before suddenly gone, like vanished gone. Not in the trash, not under the sink, just missing. Still, nothing felt malicious. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked every night. I checked obsessively. I figured I was just a little off. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Or maybe with the drinking I'd been doing in the evenings, I was just more forgetful than usual. By the time the leaves started to change, I basically talked myself out of any real concern. I mean, what else could it be? Then December rolled in, and with it came the sounds from the attic. Nothing dramatic, no footsteps or banging, just light creaks now and then, subtle enough that you could convince yourself it was the wind or the house settling. The attic wasn't a real, usable space, just a cramped crawl space with a low ceiling and exposed beams. I'd tossed a couple boxes up there during the move. Some old clothes, photo albums, a box of stuff from my dad's garage I hadn't had the heart to go through yet, but I hadn't touched it since. I assumed it was mice, or a squirrel, or some other creature finding its way in from the cold. Bell Ridge is the kind of place where you're never more than 100 yards from something with fur and teeth. I thought about setting traps, but I wasn't really eager to climb up into that cramped, dusty space. Then, sometime in early February, I found a half-eaten jar of peanut butter sitting on the basement stairs. Not on a shelf, not on the floor, on the third step from the bottom. Lid off. Spoon inside. I just stood there staring at it. I hadn't been down in the basement in weeks. It wasn't really functional, just bare cement, a water heater, and a broken dryer I'd been meaning to get hauled out. I'd never once brought food down there, but there it was, my jar, half empty. That's when I stopped sleeping all the way through the night. One night in March, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a sharp clatter. Not loud, but distinct, like plastic hitting wood. I grabbed my flashlight and did a slow walk through the house. Everything looked normal, until I saw it. The attic hatch in the hallway ceiling, it was open, just slightly. Just enough to see the edges weren't flush like they usually were, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you were looking straight at it. I stood under it for a long time, flashlight aimed up at the opening. I couldn't see anything beyond the edge, just dark. And the air felt off, cooler. Like the insulation up there wasn't doing its job anymore. I didn't own a ladder tall enough to reach it, and I wasn't about to drag over a chair and poke my head up into who knows what in the middle of the night. Instead, I went back to my room, locked the door, and slept with the flashlight next to the bed. First time I'd ever locked a door in my own house. The next morning, I called a pest control company. Told them I thought maybe I had raccoons or something worse up in the attic. The guy who showed up was middle-aged, chatty at first, until he went up there. When he came back down, he wasn't chatty anymore. Said there were food wrappers, a couple of ratty blankets, even an empty can of beans. Told me it looked like someone had been sleeping up there. Might have been a squatter before I moved in, he said, though he didn't sound convinced by his own theory. He looked me in the eye and said, "You should probably call the sheriff, just to be safe." So I did. A deputy came by that afternoon. His name was Givens, I think. He was calm, professional, but the second he stepped into the attic and stayed up there for more than a few minutes, I could feel something shift. When he came back down, his face was tight. He asked if I lived alone. I told him yes. He asked how long I'd been there. I said about 8 months. He nodded once and told me he needed me to come with him to the station. They'd found more than just blankets. There were notebooks, pages full of messy handwriting, a jacket, worn out but still intact, a pair of boots with dried mud caked into the soles, a hunting knife tucked into a rolled-up towel, and that second phone, the one that wasn't mine. Burnt orange case, cracked screen. It was still charged. Whoever had been up there wasn't just squatting. They'd been living there. For months, maybe the whole time I had. The attic didn't lock from the inside. That meant whoever it was had to come down when I wasn't home or when I was asleep. They must have watched me enough to know my schedule, known when it was safe to move around. The prints they lifted belonged to a man named Grady Miller. I'd never heard of him before, but he had a record. Started with break-ins, then assault, then a kidnapping charge that got thrown out due to lack of evidence. He'd served time at a low-security facility near Camden and had been released less than a year before I moved in. They never found him. He was gone by the time the sheriff's department got involved. Disappeared. They found signs in the woods behind the house, cigarette butts, trampled underbrush, a little clearing with a perfect view of my back windows. After the police packed up and left, I didn't sleep there again. I packed a bag and drove to my cousin Lana's place in Waverly. The house was just outside a town called Miller's Hill, tucked along one of those winding Tennessee roads where everything looks like it's been there for 50 years longer than it has. I'd moved in 3 days earlier and was trying to go through a checklist I'd made, just boring stuff to help me feel grounded. First up, check all the cabinets and shelves to match the inspector's notes. I figured the kitchen was the best place to start. It was clean, manageable, and not as overwhelming as the attic or the garage. I moved through each cabinet methodically, opening doors, checking hinges, lightly pushing them closed and watching how they aligned. There's something calming about the rhythm of it. Simple, tangible. It gave me the illusion that I was settling in. Then I got to the cabinet beside the fridge. The latch was angled slightly downward. Not a huge thing, barely noticeable if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. I always leave latches facing the same way, rounded end pointing straight, clean line. I remembered adjusting that one during the walkthrough, remembered how it clicked into place. So seeing it off kilter set off a small alarm in my brain. I tightened the screw, nudged it back into position, and chalked it up to house settling quirks. No big deal. At least that's what I told myself. After the kitchen, I moved down the hallway to check the closet shelves. That's where the weird feeling really started to creep in. I opened the hall closet and saw my toolbox, big, red, a little dented on the corner, sitting up on the top shelf. That stopped me. I'd carried that thing in on move-in day myself, and I specifically remember dropping it on the bottom shelf because my arms were giving out. It's not light. Definitely not something I'd absent-mindedly lift above shoulder height without noticing. Still, I tried to explain it away. I checked for dust. There was a perfect rectangle of it on the top shelf, but it didn't match the shape of the box. Something smaller had been there before. The outline was clear. Whatever used to sit up there was gone now, and my toolbox had taken its place. I moved it back down, trying to act normal, but I could feel myself fidgeting more than usual. Then I went to the laundry room. I was setting things up back there, organizing supplies. I keep my cleaning stuff in a white plastic bin, nothing fancy, just one of those cheap ones with the cutout handles on the side. I always leave it by the back wall, tucked behind the washer. When I reached for it, it was gone. Found it right near the door instead. It had been rotated 90 degrees, and inside, every single bottle glass cleaner, degreaser, bleach was arranged standing up in a single perfect vertical line, like someone had taken the time to line them up deliberately. The bleach was sitting at the top of the line, which was strange because that bottle leaks if you tilt it the wrong way. I checked the floor, expecting to see a puddle or drips. Nothing. And the dust where I usually kept the bin hadn't been disturbed. No drag marks. Just a clean, undisturbed space. That's when I started to slow down a little. Still, I kept going. I told myself I must have moved things without noticing. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was flustered, but the explanations were starting to feel thin. Later in the afternoon, I turned my attention to the attic. The inspector had made a note about the tension rods on the pull-down ladder needing adjustment. I grabbed a screwdriver, pulled the ladder down, and climbed up slowly, more out of habit than curiosity. The attic was mostly empty dry wood, insulation, and 2 wooden crates left by the last owner. They looked old but not ancient. One was closed with a latch, the other was wedged slightly open. I gave in and opened the first one. Inside was a small portable cassette player, the kind with the big clicky buttons. The corner was dented, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in a long time. Definitely wasn't mine. The second crate held a folder, just loose papers, maybe 50 or 60 sheets. I flipped through a few and saw rows of names, each followed by a neat check mark. No addresses, no notes, just names and check marks. None of them were familiar. I put the folder back, pushed the lid closed, and climbed back down. When I stepped into the hallway, I stopped cold. The toolbox was back out. It was sitting in the middle of the floor, perfectly aligned with the doorway. I hadn't even been gone that long, less than an hour. And I knew for a fact I had put that box back on the bottom shelf and shut the door. I picked it up. Same weight, same chipped handle, same scratch across the lid. It was mine. But now it was here, just waiting for me. This time, I shut it back inside the closet and slammed the door so hard I heard the hinges complain. I needed to calm down, so I went to the kitchen and grabbed the inspection packet. Just something rational, something with ink and paper and dates. I flipped to the last page where I'd written notes earlier that morning, except they were gone. In their place, someone had written the word checked over and over again, filling every line from top to bottom in handwriting that looked uncannily like mine. Same angle, same shade to the letters. But the pressure was wrong. I press hard when I write. My pen leaves grooves. These marks were faint, almost shy, like someone copying the way I write, but without the confidence. I pulled a blank sheet and walked toward the living room. That's when I saw it. The cleaning bin was sitting on the coffee table. Same bottles, same weird arrangement. That leaky bleach bottle still at the top, perfectly upright. The laundry room door was still open. I walked back and returned the bin, slower this time. I didn't rush. I put it exactly where it had been that morning. Then I tried calling the realtor. Her name was Dana. Straight to voicemail. I left a quick message asking if she knew anything about the crates in the attic. Not 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Caller ID said the house landline was calling me. I hadn't set up the landline. I answered, expecting static or maybe some confused technician. What I heard was a slow, soft tapping, like someone gently tapping their nail or a pen on the receiver. Tap, 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 evenly spaced. Almost thoughtful. It went on for about 10 seconds before the line went dead. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, and then walked back toward the attic. The ladder was still up, folded into the ceiling. I pulled it down, climbed up again, and checked the crates. One was open. The cassette player was gone. The folder was now sitting on top of the other crate, partially open, like someone had just looked through it. I didn't touch anything, just closed the crates again, climbed down, and folded the ladder away. After that, I went through the entire house. Every cabinet, every drawer, every closet. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just needed to know where things were. I wanted to feel like I was the one in control of my space. Everything was fine until I reached the back door. The deadbolt was unlocked. That one detail made my stomach turn. I had locked it that morning. I remember checking it. I relocked it, then I flipped the bolt again. It moved easily, like nothing had happened. And maybe nothing had. But it didn't feel that way. I went back to the kitchen, picked up that final page again, and held it under the overhead light. On the back, in the same strange, soft handwriting, was a new list of names. The first few matched the ones from the attic folder. The last one was mine. That was the line. That was the line. I folded the paper slowly, grabbed my keys, and left. I walked out the front door, shut it behind me, and waited for the latch to click. That click felt solid, real, like the world was still holding together. I drove into town and bought new locks, new bolts, a steel bar for the back door. Back at the house, I installed every new piece before I even sat down. Then I packed the folder, the attic papers, and the strange crate items into a box and sealed it shut. I've been renting for over a decade basement apartments, noisy duplexes, a 2-year stint in a converted garage that somehow still haunts my lower back. Finally, after years of budgeting and bouncing between jobs, I scraped together enough for a down payment and bought a house. The price had been suspiciously low for the area, but the inspection came back clean. No foundation issues. No major electrical problems. The seller was a quiet guy in his late 50s. Moved out of state for a job and left the place mostly empty. Said he hadn't lived there much the last couple years, just used it for storage. I moved in the second week of May with my 2 dogs, Bear and Murphy, a mattress, and about a dozen boxes that held what little I owned. First night, I slept on the floor with the dogs curled up beside me. It felt good, like a reset button. I remember thinking how quiet the area was. No traffic, no upstairs neighbors stomping around. Just the occasional owl and the wind through the trees out back. The first 2 weeks were normal, peaceful even. I fixed a loose fence post so the dogs could run in the backyard without supervision, swapped out a busted bathroom light, got a new mailbox, started unpacking, slowly making the place feel like home. The dogs adjusted fast. They're used to new environments. But by week 3, they started acting strange. It started with a weird bundle I found behind the water heater. I wasn't even looking for anything in particular. I was just clearing out cobwebs, figuring out what pipes went where. I noticed something tucked way back in the corner. It was wrapped in a dirty piece of what looked like canvas or linen, tied shut with what I swear was human hair. It looked brittle and sun-bleached but still tightly knotted. I probably should have just left it alone, but of course I opened it. Inside were a few small items. A worn child's shoe, about the size of a toddler's. A smooth coin completely blank on both sides, like the face had been sanded off. And what I think were teeth. Not human teeth. Too small, too sharp. I honestly didn't examine them long. I just wrapped everything back up, walked it straight to the outdoor trash bin, and tossed it in. I remember standing there afterward, wiping my hands on my jeans thinking, okay, that was weird, and trying to move on. That night, the dogs refused to go into the hallway that led to the bedrooms and laundry room, just stopped cold in the living room and growled. I called them like normal, nothing. Bear let out this low rumble I'd never heard from him before, and Murphy pressed herself against the back of the couch like she was trying to vanish into it. I walked down the hall myself, every light on, checking each room. Nothing was out of place. I even said out loud, "See? Nothing's there." But they still wouldn't come. The next morning, same thing. They wouldn't go near the back half of the house. Bear started sleeping under the kitchen table, and Murphy curled up behind the couch cushions. That entire hallway might as well have been a cliff's edge. I even tried tossing treats to coax them down the hall, and Bear just sat down and stared at me like I'd betrayed him. Then the light started acting up. First, it was the bedroom. The overhead light would flicker, then cut out completely for about 10 minutes before snapping back on. A few days later, the living room lamp did the same. Eventually, the entire back half of the house had this strange rhythm. Lights would flicker out, stay dark for a stretch, then hum back to life like nothing happened. I figured it was bad wiring, maybe rodents chewing through insulation, so I called an electrician. He showed up, took a look at the panel, checked every socket and switch, and eventually shrugged. Said everything looked weirdly clean for a house this old. No moisture damage, no frayed wires, nothing loose. Honestly, he said, I've seen worse setups in brand new builds. Then he laughed and joked, maybe you've got a ghost. I laughed too, but it didn't feel funny. It was around then I stopped sleeping well. Not insomnia exactly. More like I kept waking up at the same time every night, just after 3 in the morning. I wouldn't hear anything, but I'd jolt awake with this tightness in my chest, like someone was pushing on it. I'd lie there frozen for a minute or two, heart pounding, struggling to catch my breath. Then it would pass, and I'd be wide awake, completely alert, no dreams, no explanation, just up. The dogs would be sitting upright in the corner of the bedroom, not curled up, not asleep, just sitting there, facing the hallway like statues. And then I started hearing it. It was always the same sound. A low, wet, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across tile. It came from the laundry room, always late at night, always after the lights flickered. The first time, I sat up in bed and just listened. It didn't get louder, didn't move toward me. It just paced, back and forth, slow, deliberate. The dogs didn't bark. They whimpered. Murphy climbed halfway onto the bed and shook until sunrise. After that, I stopped going into the laundry room at night. A few days later, I noticed the crawl space door was open. Just a crack, but enough to see the dark behind it. When I'd moved in, that door was sealed with layers of old paint. I had to break the lime just to check it during the inspection. I'd shut it afterward and hadn't touched it since. Now it moved freely, like it had always been loose. I shut it and pushed a heavy storage box in front of it. The next morning, the box was across the room. I stared at it for way too long. Tried to convince myself I'd moved it and forgot, but I hadn't. That box was filled with power tools and old books, easily 40 or 50 pounds. It doesn't just slide around. I moved it back, then, without even thinking, poured a line of salt across the crawl space door. I don't know why I did it. I don't believe in any of that stuff. It just felt like the right thing to do. Like something people do in stories when they're out of options. The salt held for 2 nights. Then, on the third morning, it was swept into a perfect crescent shape, not scattered, not stepped through, just carefully curved, like someone had drawn it with the edge of their hand. That's when I bought the camera. Basic motion sensor, nothing fancy. I set it up in the laundry room facing the crawl space door. That night, I stayed awake in the living room, waiting to see if anything triggered it. Nothing happened. Next morning, I checked the camera. It had been flipped face down sometime in the middle of the night. The footage ended abruptly at 2:48 a.m. No movement, no sound, just a cut. That was enough for me. That evening, I packed a suitcase, grabbed some essentials, and left for my sister's place across town. After the divorce, things in Bridgeport just felt stale. Too many familiar corners, too many people who knew too much. The condo sold fast enough, and once that check hit, I didn't stick around. My buddy Neil's cousin had a line on a place down south, outside a little town in Tennessee called Elbridge. According to the realtor, an older couple had owned it forever. Husband passed, wife left the state soon after. Just an old house waiting for someone to live in it again. I didn't waste time. Signed everything after a 10-minute walkthrough. The place was dusty but solid, and I told myself that the isolation would be good for me. A reset. The first few days were spent unpacking, fixing things here and there. There was no cell service inside the house unless I stood on a specific tile near the sink. Closest grocery store was 15 miles out. Mail came twice a week, but it didn't bother me. I was fine being alone. The silence out there was different. It wasn't empty. It just left you alone. Then on the 4th evening, around sunset, I was hauling some old lumber behind the shed when I noticed someone walking up the driveway. No car, just a guy, maybe in his 40s, wearing faded camo and one of those orange hunting caps. He was built solid, probably 6 feet tall, and walked like he knew exactly where he was going. When he saw me, he lifted his hand a little, not a wave, more like a slow-motion salute. I walked up to meet him, halfway between the house and the tree line. Before I could say anything, he nodded at the house and said, "Y'all moved in quick." I told him I had, mentioned Linda, the woman who'd rented me the place. He didn't really react, just kept looking past me, eyes fixed on the woods like he was watching for something. "She never came back for her dogs," he said. I blinked, told him I hadn't seen any dogs around. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he tilted his head a little and asked, "You open up the lower crawl yet?" I said no. I knew there were 2 crawl spaces, one near the front, one built into the back slope, but I hadn't gotten around to either. He nodded once. Don't. Not alone, at least. Then he turned and walked off, not down the driveway into the woods. Just disappeared like he'd walked through an open door nobody else could see. It didn't scare me, not exactly, but I did start locking the doors at night. And I moved the crowbar from the shed to the living room. The next week was uneventful, but a little harder to relax. I kept thinking about that guy, wondering if he'd been a neighbor or just some drifter who knew the place. Then came the barking. First time, it was around midnight. Woke me up out of a dead sleep. It wasn't close, but not far either. Sharp, panicked barks like something trapped or frantic. I got up, looked out the windows. Nothing. Next night, same thing. This time closer. Same bark, same urgency. But always gone by the time I made it to the door. I stayed up the night after that, sat in the dark with a blanket and a warm beer by the front window. Sometime around 2, I heard it again, only it wasn't barking. It was footsteps. On the deck, heavy ones. One step, then another, then nothing. I didn't move for a while, just sat there holding my breath. When I finally stood up and flipped on the porch light, I threw the door open fast, like that would catch somebody off guard. But no one was there, just the hum of bugs and the faint creak of trees shifting in the wind. Next morning I walked the property. Didn't expect to find anything, but by the back crawl space, there were footprints. Work boots, big ones, the kind that leave deep tracks if someone's been standing still for a while. I didn't call the cops. What would I even say? Hi, someone might have been watching my house last night but left politely and didn't steal anything. I just kept checking the locks and started sleeping with the shotgun I'd used once for skeet shooting a decade ago. That weekend, I called Derek, old friend from college. He lived in Knoxville and always liked excuses to drink beer and swing a hammer. I told him the place needed some work and I was spooked by some weird noises. He showed up Saturday afternoon with a cooler, a Bluetooth speaker, and a baseball bat, just in case. We grilled, patched up a bit of siding, and I told him about the guy in the woods, the barking, the steps. He didn't laugh, which surprised me. Derek laughs at everything. Instead, he got quiet, nodded, and said, "Let's check the crawl." We went around back, and I unlocked the rusted hatch. It stuck a little, but eventually gave way to reveal a concrete slope that disappeared into a dark, musty crawl space. No lights, no real insulation, just poured concrete and shadows. Derek crouched and went first, using the flashlight on his keychain. "Smells like piss," he muttered. He crawled in a few feet, then he stopped. "There's something down here." I dropped to my knees and followed, cold concrete on my hands. The light hit 2 large metal cages in the back corner, rusted, stained, with deep scratches along the bars. Next to them were several torn dog food bags, some half rotted, and a bundled tarp, lumpy and damp. We dragged the tarp toward us. Inside were 3 dog collars. The leather had decayed and curled. 2 had tags, Rusty and Chopper. The third didn't have one. Derek stared for a long time. Then he crawled out without a word. We stood in the yard, not talking, not moving, like our feet didn't quite believe they were back on solid ground. That night, Derek left the shotgun with me and drove home. He didn't offer to stay, and I didn't ask. 3 days later, the barking came back. Only this time, it was underneath me, not outside, not in the woods, under the floor. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to it echo through the walls. Not a recording, not some distant animal. It was right there, pacing, barking, clawing, maybe. I ran outside, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other, and opened the back crawl hatch. Instant silence. No movement, no sound, just the thick stillness that comes when something leaves. The next morning, the crawl space was empty, clean. The cages were gone. The tarp was gone. Even the moldy bags had vanished. I took pictures, sent them to Derek. He replied, "You cleaned it out?" I didn't respond. Instead, I called Linda, the woman who rented me the place. Told her I'd found something odd in the crawl. She went quiet, long enough that I thought we'd lost the connection. Then she said, "You found the cages." I asked why they were there. She hesitated, then said, "My husband used to breed dogs. It got bad toward the end. I tried to clear everything before renting it. I didn't think anyone would go down there." She hung up before I could ask what bad meant. I was 27 when I moved to Tennessee. Things had kind of unraveled all at once. The lease on my apartment in Dayton was up, and my relationship, 6 years long, with a shared dog and a Spotify account. I didn't want to couch surf or move back in with my parents, and right when I was figuring out what came next, my Aunt Lena called. She owned this place outside a town called Stonebrook, real quiet. Mostly trees, maybe 2 gas stations. I hadn't seen the house since I was a teenager, but I remembered it being set way back off a gravel road, surrounded by woods. She told me nobody was using it, that I could stay as long as I wanted. Said she kept it for family transitions, which was her polite way of saying emotional breakdowns, divorces, or tax problems. It sounded like exactly the kind of place where no one would ask how I was doing. The house was small but solid, just 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, with furniture that looked like it hadn't moved since the early 2000s. The kitchen had those fake wood laminate cabinets, the kind that peel if you spill anything hot, but it wasn't abandoned. It just felt paused. There were still canned green beans and dusty rice in the pantry, sheets on the bed, even a flashlight with working batteries in the drawer by the sink. I dropped my bags in the bigger of the 2 bedrooms and just stood there for a second, letting the quiet settle over me. No upstairs neighbors, no street noise, no passive-aggressive fridge notes. It was weirdly comforting. The first couple weeks were peaceful in a way that made me realize how tightly wound I'd been. I didn't have a job yet, so I spent most days fixing little things, replacing old bulbs, resealing the shower grout, tightening the kitchen cabinet hinges so they stopped squeaking every time I opened one. The place slowly started to feel less like a leftover and more like something mine. Then, maybe 3 weeks in, I noticed something odd about the bedroom. It was the closet. Nothing dramatic, just off-center. I don't know why it caught my attention one day, but I remember staring at it while brushing my teeth and thinking, why would someone build it like that? It was too far to the right on the wall, and when I opened it, it was only about 2 feet deep, which didn't make sense. That wall backed into the same room. There should have been more space. Curiosity kicked in. I grabbed a tape measure, measured the bedroom wall from the corner to the edge of the closet, then measured the inside of the closet itself. There were about 4 feet unaccounted for. At first, I thought maybe there was some kind of crawl space or old utility access. The house was old enough to have weird quirks, so I knocked along the wall inside the closet. Most of it gave that soft, hollow sound of drywall. But there was one section, about chest height and a foot wide, that sounded different, duller, like something solid behind it. I stood there for a while, just holding my hand against that spot. I wasn't scared exactly, more curious, and I had nothing but time. I ended up cutting out a small square of drywall, just enough to peek behind. That's when I found the first door. No knob, no hinges, just old raw wood wedged into a frame like it had been fitted there by hand. It didn't match the other doors in the house. This one looked much older, maybe original to whatever had been here before renovations. I pried it open with a flat head in my palm. Behind it, a short hallway, 5 feet long, maybe less. The walls were just drywall painted white, no markings, no lights. At the end of the hallway was a second door. This one did have a knob, brass, tarnished, cold to the touch. There was no sound coming from behind it, no smell, no air movement, just stillness. I opened it. The room inside was maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, no windows, just a chair. One plain wooden chair in the center of the room. Sitting in front of it was a mirror full length, leaning against the far wall. Nothing else, no cobwebs, no dust, like someone had cleaned it recently. Behind the chair, scrawled across the wall in thick black marker, were 4 words: sit, wait, watch, until it copies. That's when I started feeling off. Not scared exactly, but like I'd walked into the wrong scene of someone else's story. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, not moving. Then I backed out, shut both doors, patched the drywall, and shoved the dresser in front of the closet. I told myself it was just a weird leftover room, maybe someone's old meditation space. Maybe Lena used it for storage back in the day and forgot about it. I told myself all kinds of things, and that probably would have been the end of it. But 2 nights later, around 1 in the morning, I woke up to a sound. A soft creak, then another. The kind of sound you'd expect from floorboards under slow, careful steps. Except they weren't in the room. They were behind the wall. It sounded like someone pacing. Not stomping, not dragging, just walking, back and forth, behind the drywall, in the space where that hallway was. The next morning, I checked the closet. Everything looked untouched. The dresser was still tight against it, drywall still sealed. I tried to brush it off, but the pacing came back. Not every night, just often enough that I started dreading the silence. Sometimes I'd wake up just before it started, like my brain knew it was coming. The steps would go on for 5, maybe 10 minutes, then stop all at once, like whoever or whatever was back there didn't want to be heard too long. Then one afternoon I came in from stacking firewood, and something was off. The bedroom door was shut. I never closed it. Not once. I stepped inside. The closet door was wide open. My chest locked up for a second. Everything else in the room looked normal. Bed untouched, window shut, dresser drawers closed. But that closet, I walked over slowly, half expecting to see something waiting on the other side. But it was just dark. I pulled the drywall panel aside. The narrow hallway was still there. At the end, the second door. I opened it. The room looked the same, except the chair had moved. It wasn't dramatic, just turned slightly to the right. Like someone had sat in it, shifted, and gotten up. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the light on, fully dressed, waiting. At 2:14, I saw it. Movement. Not big, just something in the far corner of the room. A shape shifting slightly, like someone adjusting their posture. I sat up, looked right at it. There was nothing there. The next day, I drove into town and bought a trail cam, one of those cheap hunting models that snaps pictures when it senses movement. I set it on a shelf across from the closet and aimed it toward the wall. The next morning, I checked the card. At 1:40 a.m., the footage skipped, just for a second, then it came back. There was a figure standing in front of the closet. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The lighting looked weird, but then I leaned in closer. It was me. Same hoodie, same socks, same slightly uneven posture I have when I'm half asleep. But it wasn't me. The figure stared at the wall, then took a step forward and disappeared behind it. I should have packed my things right then and left, but something about it pulled at me, like the room itself was waiting. That night, I opened the wall again, walked through the narrow hallway and sat down in the chair. I moved out before the week was over. Told my aunt the house had a mold problem, said I couldn't breathe right at night. Now I live in a 3rd-floor apartment with loud pipes and neighbors who slam their doors at all hours. I was 27 when I moved into a house just outside a little place called Wayland, Tennessee. I just packed what fit in my car, left a note for the landlord in Atlanta, and started driving north before the city woke up. I didn't tell many people, didn't really want to. Sometimes you're not leaving for a better place, just a different one. The house was a foreclosure. I bought it online for what felt like pocket change. No inspection, no walkthrough, just a few grainy photos and a list of minor repairs needed. It looked like it had been empty for a while, long enough for the grass to swallow the mailbox, and for birds to start nesting in the eaves. But it was mine, cheap, isolated, and more or less standing. It sat at the end of a cracked gravel road, one of those stubborn ranch-style places with red brick and a porch that leaned just enough to make you nervous. The backyard ran into an acre of woods. Nothing but trees and dead leaves, so thick you couldn't see 10 feet in. Quiet though. You could hear yourself think. I spent the first week cleaning, or trying to. Every room had its own brand of grime. The kitchen smelled like mildew. The bathroom mirror had this weird fog that wouldn't wipe away. I replaced floorboards, cleared out dead bugs, and duct taped a broken vent shut because it rattled when the wind hit it. All the normal stuff, right? By day 4, I thought I was doing okay, and then the back door started unlocking itself. At first, I figured it was just me. I was tired, distracted, running on fast food and lukewarm coffee. The door was old, wood swollen from years of humidity, with a stubborn brass handle and a deadbolt that needed some muscle to click into place. I remember locking it one night, really locking it, putting my back into the twist. I even tugged the knob to check. Next morning, it was wide open. Not cracked, not halfway. Just standing open, like someone wanted me to notice. I stood there a long time, staring out at the trees. I didn't move, didn't say anything, just listened. No wind, no birds. Just the stillness you only get in places far from people. I finally closed it, locked it again, and forced myself to move on. Told myself I'd probably just been careless. But it happened again, and then again, and then again. I bought a new deadbolt, brushed off some basic YouTube tutorials, and installed it myself. It felt solid, better than the first, for sure. Next morning, door was open. That's when I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. It faced the backyard, and I couldn't deal with that anymore. I started crashing on the couch with the TV on low. Noise helped, even if it was just the muffled drone of some late-night infomercial. Every night, I'd double-check the deadbolt, shove a kitchen chair under the knob, even pile a few pans in front of it like a makeshift alarm. Some nights, the chair was still there in the morning, but the lock would be undone. Other times, the chair would be tipped over or slid a few inches to the side like someone had quietly moved it out of the way. Once, I found my sneakers outside the back door, side by side, like someone had taken them for a walk and brought them back. I started writing things down. Times, details, tiny observations. I made a kind of checklist, locked the door at 11:30, used the green chair tonight, left brown boots by the mat, trying to prove to myself that something was happening, that I wasn't just losing it. Eventually, I bought a security cam, just a cheap indoor model from a big box store. I set it up in the kitchen, aimed straight at the back door. First night, nothing happened. Second night, same. Then, on the third night, I woke up to the door open again. Checked the footage, only there wasn't any. The recording just stopped. Not for the whole night. It cut off a few minutes before the door opened, like someone had turned it off. I thought the battery had died, so I plugged it in. Still happened. Every night I tried, the file would cut off right before the moment I needed to see. So I got sneaky. Set up a second camera, hidden behind some canned food in the pantry, angled to catch the first one. That way, if someone was messing with it, I'd see them. Didn't work. Both feeds went dark. That's when I started sleeping with a hammer. Not because I thought it would do much, but holding it made me feel like I had a little control left. I'd lay there on the couch, one eye on the door, one hand wrapped around the handle. By that point, I wasn't really sleeping. More like drifting in and out with the TV buzzing and the hammer warm in my palm. Then the lights started flickering. Always the same pattern, 3 quick blinks, pause, 1 long flicker, only in the hallway. I counted it, timed it, tried different bulbs, flipped breakers, even called an electrician. He came out, poked around, didn't find anything wrong. Old houses, he shrugged. They do weird stuff sometimes. One night, I was standing in the kitchen eating cereal out of a box, lights doing their usual flicker, when that last long blink hit and the back door clicked open. Not swung, not creaked. Clicked, like someone turned the handle gently. I froze. The door eased open an inch or two, just enough to feel the night air. I didn't go investigate. I grabbed the hammer, stepped outside barefoot, and stood there, just breathing, staring into the trees like I expected something to walk out. Nothing did, just black trees and brittle leaves. I stayed outside until the sky turned gray. Next day, I nailed the back door shut. Wood plank, Big nails, no gaps. I checked it 3 times. It stayed shut. That night, I finally crashed in the bedroom again, woke up cold around 3 a.m., and realized the window was open. It had been painted shut when I moved in. I remembered scraping at the frame with a screwdriver and giving up. Now it was wide open, screen popped out, blinds fluttering in the breeze. I closed it, repainted the edges. Didn't sleep. Just sat in the living room watching the hallway light do its little dance. Next morning, I went to leave and both doors on my truck were wide open. No broken glass. No scratches. Nothing missing. Just open. That was it for me. I drove to a cheap motel off the highway.